Welcome to the Flyboy Podcast, where we bring you just one thing, cool flying stories. I'm your host, David Moore, and today I'll be talking with Rick Glitz. Rick served for 30 years in the Air Force, half that time on active duty and half in the reserves. And he also spent 17 years at Southwest Airlines. He's flown the F-111, the A-7, the F-117, and the F-16, as well as the 737 for Southwest. He has a total of 10,000 flying hours, and that includes 2,200 in the military and about 8,000 with Southwest. So with that, Rick, welcome to the Flyboy Podcast.
Thanks, Never. Pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
So between the F-111, the A-7, the F-117, and the F-16, which was the most fun to fly, and why?
Fun to fly and why? You have various different measures of fun. I've had over 1,000 hours in the F-111, and when you have that long-term of a relationship with an airplane, it just gets to be comfortable. You know what it's capable of doing. You know how to make it perform the mission the way you want it to. You get a partnership going with your Wizzo, because it's a two-seat airplane. So I really enjoyed my 1,000 hours in that. The F-117, I wouldn't say it was particularly fun to fly. It was challenging. But there were moments like when you're flying at 2 a.m. over downtown Sacramento, and it just hits you that not only do they not know I'm up here, they don't even know this thing exists. It was all special access secrecy at the time, and you could say, what a thing we've created for the country here. What a capability, and they let me do it. A7, I was never particularly comfortable in that, maybe because we were dual qualified then in the A7 and the 117, but it was a great transition airplane from the analog avionics, hamster-driven avionics in the F-111A to the F-16C, which I think has got to be hands down the most fun to fly. It does everything. It does pretty much every mission, and it does every mission well. You sit there in a bubble on the pointy end of it with a canopy rail. You can't see where I'm gesturing, but it's like down on my waist. It's glass all the way to here. You can barely even see your own wingtips, and you just kind of think, like, I'd like to turn left, and there you go. But it requires you to be on your toes. The airplane can make you a hero, or it can make you look like a chump in short order. And I'll leave it to the audience to decide or guess which one happened to me more frequently. But yeah, hands down, the F-16 was just, you could tell when you got in there that a pilot was involved in designing it. The only time you really were heads down in the cockpit was on the ground doing the pre-flight, setting the switches up. After that, everything was on the stick and throttles and right up in front of your face in the HUD. It was just really well designed.
Well, tell us about your most memorable flight.
I have a total of 0 combat hours, so any of your guests who flew in combat probably have a plethora of stories more interesting than mine, but I'll go with what's supposed to be the next best thing, a red flag story. Flying the F-111A, we were doing we were deployed down there for a couple of weeks, and for this particular red flag, there was an Army Hawk site. And they were out at the end of Worthington Ridge, which, for anybody familiar with the Nellis range space, that's this very visible ridge line that kind of divides the airspace east and west. And they were camped out down there. And I'd probably be in a grumpy mood if I was camped out in the Nellis ranges, living in a tent. But the people in the Hawk battery would come and into the debrief, and they just come up there, yeah, we shot this guy down, we shot that guy down, we shot them all down, we shoot everything down. It doesn't matter, sort out the tail numbers when you find the wreckage. We don't care. They were real popular at the time. Where I'm going with the story was not intentional. This just happened one day. We're on a mission to bomb the simulated airfield in range 76. One of these things where you got like about a 600-knot weapons delivery, and then after the bomb comes off, you just go full afterburner, get down low, and get out of there as fast as you can. But we're supersonic down on the deck. My Wizzo's sitting next to me, and he's got the chart. He's like, we're getting close to the end of the supersonic area here. We start slowing down. And the way we did that in the 111, when you're really going maximum performance, is you just ease the throttles back to minimum afterburner and then start a hard turn one way or the other and get subsonic by using the drag of the turn. Then roll out and take them out of afterburner one at a time. And that was to be nice to the engines so they didn't do things like blow up. These were the first ever afterburning turbofans rated for supersonic flight, so they were a little finicky at times. So anyway, he says, better start slowing down. I go through the drill, pulling back. I start a hard turn, and just right as I bank to the left, I see a bunch of camo netting and trucks and tents and stuff right there. And that was a Hawk site. And a quick glance right back inside, and I see 1.15 Mach and 75 feet AGL. So we were not popular at that point. My ops officer met us, and You were the guys that boomed the Hawk site. We know that. So we told him, oh, no, we're subsonic, really. He goes, what do you mean subsonic? How fast? Oh, 99, 98, 99. And he goes, 0.99. That's not subsonic in the F-111. You still got local shock waves coming off the bigger parts of the airplane, canopy, whatever. He knew we were lying our butts off, and we knew he knew. And he knew we knew he knew. So, but he ran with that story and kept us out of trouble, kept us from getting sent home. So that's what a great ops officer can do for you, is save your butt when you really deserve to be punished. So, Chris, if you're out there listening to this, thank you. It was 40 years ago, but I remember.
Well, I think it probably also helped reinforce to the Army guys there just what an F-111 can do.
Yeah, when you're supersonic, they don't hear you coming. They hear you leaving.
That's right.
For sure.
That's right. So tell us about your worst in-flight emergency.
There are worse things than the one I'm going to describe, but this is very interesting. This is when I was doing my initial checkout in the F-117, at the place where we used to go to fly daytime. And what we would do at the time is the instructor would be at an A7, and the student checking out, me in this case, is in the F-117. We'd both pull on the runway. The A7 would take off. The instructor, he'd loop around, turn back around, and call, release your brakes now, or start rolling, whatever the call was. And he'd pull up in your wing just as took off in the F-117. He makes a call, I start rolling, take off, raise the gear handle, and the airplane starts kind of doing chunk and making these noises like thunk, thunk, thunk. And it's not supposed to do that. This is like, I don't know, my third flight. And I'm pretty certain Mark Doherty was my instructor flying the A7 out there. And Buck Nelson was a soft that they were talking to him too. Using the gear handle didn't give me the desired results. And it's going to keep making this noise as long as I leave it in the position, the handle in the position. And so throw it back down. Easy decision there. 3 green lights come back on, the noise stops. Okay. And Mark says, well, let's just go fly the mission with the gear down. But it hadn't occurred to me, you could just take the F-117 up to, 17,000 feet or whatever with the gear down and still work all the sensors, find the turn points, do the updates, whatever we're doing. Okay, fly off and looking for our first turn point, and I get a caution light, and I think it was left bleed duct hot. That's basically like an engine overheat. It's the next best thing to a fire light. I tell them I got this caution light, and back then everything was special access, and we'd be careful what we're saying over the radio. So we had this little chart. You're supposed to, it's like cacking up your encoding your caution light. So I'm supposed to say, I got a Mike Alpha 5 here, but I had a bleed duct hot light. So I said that. I start turning back toward the runway. Buck is a soft, is starting reading the checklist to me. Not too long after I pointed the nose back toward the runway and started down, I got a right bleed duct hot light. So now I got both bleed duct hot lights on. Well, I don't left engine pulled back now to idle since they're both in the same shape, so I just use the throttles normally. Beautiful, clear in a million days, so we just flew back and landed. And as soon as you touch down, you dump the nose down onto the runway, pull the drag chute, no chute. So gear didn't come up, 2 bleed duct hot lights, no chute, so that means hot brakes, kind of mandatory. And I forgot to say when I got onto this, when I went out to the airplane, I read the forms, the airplane had 12 hours on it. I had been flying F-111As that were built in the 60s. And I'm thinking, God bless America, look at this. Give it back to them, it had, 13 hours or something. I wasn't so enamored with the whole concept of a brand new airplane that was just put back together after flying in from Burbank. Anyway, it was a short flight, but exciting, and just a series of unrelated events.
So, Rick, tell us about the worst weather you've ever flown through to land an airplane.
Flew through rain so heavy, I got an engine compressor stall, just choked the engine. It was in the F-111, so I had another one. It made a sound like somebody hitting the side of the airplane with a hammer, and I thought my wingman had bumped into me. And then I look, and the engine gauges are rolling back. But that was easy to come back from. For some reason, we were doing a cross-country into Minot in the winter, and I was doing a PAR down to 100 feet. I never saw anything until we went around, and I could see, looking straight down, a white runway with snow blowing across it with white snowfields on the side and white. And we diverted and went to Ellsworth, and it was nice there. I had a great time. But I've learned, the weatherman's got a real sense of humor sometimes. Like at Ramstein, the European weather could be bad. But it was a nice day at Ramstein. It was a ceiling, but it was high enough. It would have been a great day to fly. But all the other bases were blottoed out with bad weather, so we had no alternate. So we couldn't fly even though our weather was good. But the guys at Bitburg, Hahn, Spang, wherever else, they had crappy weather, but they could fly because they could use Ramstein as an alternate. So it was just weird to be grounded for the day because of weather. and have it feel like this is a pretty nice day, and you see the airplanes from the other bases doing low approaches at Ramstein. And there was a time in the airlines when it was a short flight. I think it was an early morning thing from Seattle to Spokane. Beautiful, clear. First officer gets the ATIS, the automated weather broadcast, and they're saying like it's indefinite ceiling, half a mile visibility. We don't see any clouds though. Where's this bad weather? And we finally get in close enough to be able to see where the airfield is in Spokane. And it was I guess it was in like a little depression. And that was the only cloud that we could see anywhere. It was sitting right on top of the field. And it was so contained in just a little circle on top of the airfield that the runway stuck out the end of the clouds. And you could see the approach lights on and the strobe lights going zip, zip, zip here. And we had to fly an instrument approach. I said, I could see the end of the runway. Can I just do a visual approach and get off? No, you got to fly an ILS. All right, so we go around, fly the box pattern, get on final. And it's just a visual, beautiful, clear day until you get to 200 feet, then whoosh, you're in the weather, and we had to taxi very slowly in because the fog was so thick. Anyway, those are examples of weather playing pranks on you. When I was checking out the F-117, we didn't have a good simulator then. We had a procedures trainer, so you could practice flipping the switches, but you didn't practice flying. You didn't do the maneuvers. It wasn't any good for practicing landing. Somebody early in the program, and I don't know who, obviously an F-15 background kind of guy, said, geez, this F-117 lands just like an F-15 no-flap landing. Somebody in a position of authority took that, ran with it. And so what we would do is once you finished your academics, you'd have a class of like 5 or 6 guys or something at a time. And then 2 by 2, before your first flight in the F-117, you go down to Luke, TDY for 2 days. You'd have a day. Morning was academics, and the afternoon was in the simulator. You'd get the feel for the airplane on their simulator and practice some emergency procedures. And then the second day, you'd go fly. And you could go out to the area and do anything in the world you wanted. The IP in the back, this is in the front seat of the F-15. The IP in the back would be back there going, why are you here? Why are you doing this? Because we couldn't tell them. Again, it's secret special access required. And the whole idea was you come back, you shoot a bunch of landings, you work in some no-flaps, and you get a feel for, okay, this is what it looks like in an F-15 no-flap. And we're out there doing square loops and tail slides and stuff. And they go, wow, do you want to see this stuff? Just checking it out. We come back, do a bunch of patterns. And I don't know if it really helped me land the F-117, but that was sure a great flight.
Question. As Bandit 210, you guys were totally uprange. The program was totally secret still. What were the ceremonies surrounding getting your bandit number uprange?
Increased heart rate for sure when you first take off. But when you land, you get there's somebody usually hiding under the airplane with a bucket of water, if not more than one person, a fire extinguisher, just like a typical finny flight kind of ceremony. There was no dubbing a knight with a sword on your shoulders or anything. You just it became official. This was your bandit number. Typically, you had to buy the bar at least 2 remote desert locations, as we called them, the RDL. So I sent a check over to give to Roger Lockler because I figured he's one guy I could really trust with it to spend my money in the bar at Tonopah, the Tokakel, the Tonopah Officers Club and Chinese Laundry, because there was a little laundromat attached to the back, and then bought the bar where we did the checkout. You would get a little pin that would look like this guy on my hat here. It was just a little gold pin, so you could wear that around. There, nothing was given away. No secrets were given away by that. And they gave you this really nice certificate, and I would show it to you, but we just moved in the last few months, and we did have boxes of stuff, and I don't really know just quite where it is. They had the first 44/50th coins were made when I was up there, and it's trying to get the light on, get my finger out of the shadow. So A7 stars to show the 3 operating locations. This went through several iterations before people would say, no, you can't put that on there. That'll give away the secret. And there's that Nighthawk again, if you can see the bird. And the guy, the NCO who would sell these to us, had the little die and hammer set to pound my bandit number in there. Much nicer multicolored coins now, I'm sure.
So, Rick, why did you decide to join the military to become a pilot?
Well, those are not necessarily 2 separate questions. Become a military pilot. I think I was in 4th grade when my oldest brother, I have 2 brothers older than me, when he received his appointment to the Air Force Academy. And even as a fourth grader, that seemed like a pretty cool pathway to me. And then my middle brother received an appointment to the Air Force Academy. And it just seemed like it was becoming the family tradition. My father loved it because he got to save a lot of money on college tuition. So both my brothers before me were in the Air Force. They're both Air Force pilots. Both of my parents were in the Army in World War II. In fact, my mother and father met in Paris in 1944. He was to the theater chief of ordnance, and my mother was one of the very first members of the Women's Army Corps, and she became his secretary. And they were married in 1946. Her father was in the New York National Guard and deployed to the Mexican border for the punitive expedition to catch Pancho Villa in 1916 and 17. And I can trace back to at least 4 ancestors who were in the Continental Army, and one of them was an officer who was killed in action at the Battle of Oriskany in August 1777. So it's just kind of in the bloodstream, I guess. Once I was locked on a course to go to the academy, why would I do this? I'm not going to be a pilot. Current crop of cadets may have different ideas. I mean, you could get commissioned into the Space Force and never have anything to do with airplanes. But to me, that was the primary reason, to go fly jets. And I would like to point out that I am the only of my 3 brothers who flew fighters. My oldest brother flew C-123s in Vietnam and then Buffs, and my brother in the middle flew C-130s for a long career. So I'm glad I made that decision, and it turned out well. It got me where I am today.
Noble service on behalf of everyone in your family. So our thanks to them. Rick, you told me once military flying is the only profession you know of where memorial services are routine during peacetime training. Tell us about some of the friends you've lost over the years.
Yeah, you expect that kind of thing in a combat situation, but flying fighters, I mean, it's just routine that you lose airplanes, and thankfully not every lost airplane results in a lost person. Mm-hmm. But when I first showed up in Mountain Home as a second lieutenant to check out the F-111, one of the first things they did was take us on a field trip to a hangar where there were remains of a crashed airplane. A crew had been killed not long before I got there. While I was there, a academy classmate and a neighbor, a crew were in a weapons school checkout, and we're doing some kind of a low altitude guns defense, and they ejected, but too low, too late, and hit the ground, were killed. I have a guy I used to be a scheduler with, and crashed and was killed in England. And you just talk to people around the squadron. This guy ejected in Southeast Asia. These guys ejected in England. You're just living on that edge all the time. Every time you take off, it's a risk. We had, of course, in the F-117, I was the chief of flight safety and was involved in aftermath of Ross Mulhair's crash and Mike Stewart's crash at the Range 74. I actually helped pick him up literally with tweezers out there in the desert. And then, of course, Lips Teagarden, thankfully he survived. Well, he bailed out of his A-7, which then decided to turn off and hit the Ramada Inn, killing 10 people in Indianapolis. I'm sure he carries that to this day. Fortunately, in my F-16 squadron, the whole time I was there, we didn't lose an airplane or a guy. So it's just part of the lifetime. But, once you take the uniform off, it doesn't end. The suicide rate for veterans is double what it is for general population of the U.S., and for veterans 45 years old and younger, it's the second leading cause of death. I got this pin on here, which is a veteran suicide awareness pin, and I wear it in memory of a good friend of mine, classmate at the Academy, squadron mate, who 65-year-old retired colonel with a successful career, good GS job, close, loving family, and he just ended it. So it's all ranks, all ages, all colors. If you know somebody who's suffering, be the guy who talks to them. Anybody listening out there in podcast land, be the person who makes a difference. And if you're not comfortable with that, just tell them 988. Dial 988, Crisis and Suicide Hotline. Save a life.
Thank you, Rick. It's funny you mentioned your first squadron. They took you out to the hangar to look at a crash or the remains of a crash. I remember as a second lieutenant, my flight commander made us all fill out not only a will, but then to say, how do you want to be buried? And that was part of our in-processing checklist into the A-10 world.
Wow, that's planning ahead, thinking ahead. It's good for him to put you in the right mind frame.
A lot of times people talk about how memorable their first solo experience was, but not very often do people talk about the other end of the flying spectrum, Finney flights, your last flight in an airplane. Which of your Finney flights was most memorable to you?
Finney flight is usually celebrated with the guys in the squadron coming out and hosing you down with fire extinguishers and bottles of champagne and so forth, and smiles all around. And my F-111 Finney flight was kind of like that. It was good. The F-117 Finney flight, what I remember is, of course, it was late at night and dark. And I got out of the airplane. The guys were in the hangar, and Neil Flatt had a fire extinguisher behind me. And I'm running away, and the stream of water hits me in the back. And he had actually warmed up the fire extinguisher. I don't know if he put it by a heater or something, but it hit me in the back. It actually feels good. Of course, it cooled off rapidly. I remember Mike Short came out there, the commander, and took a swig of my champagne bottle. But my A7 Finney flight, we had some pretty hard-ass schedulers there. They were trying to cut back on the number of flights, and I hadn't flown the A7 in a while, so I went and asked, when am I going to fly the A7 again? It's been a while. And he looks at me and says, you remember your last flight in the A7? Yeah. He says, well, that was your last flight in the A7.
Oh.
That was it.
Wow.
Last flight before I lost my medical at Southwest Airlines. Not necessarily my last flight, but my last trip. I had a brand new first officer, and we would fly 4 or 5 legs a day in Southwest short flights. He's telling me one time we're on the ground, I really don't feel too good. Maybe I should think about getting a replacement. And I don't know where we were, but if you do that, it's going to take most of the rest of the day to get a replacement out here. And we got 1 flight left. Can you give me an hour and a half? Can we just get us to Kansas City, and then we'll call scheduling. We'll get you deadheaded home. Yeah, okay, I can do that. We'll finish the day. So we're in the airplane. We're getting ready to go, and then knock. Hi, I'm Elmer Fudd with the FAA. You're getting a check ride today. Please get out your pilot certificates and your medical certificate. Yes, sir, Mr. Fudd. Glad to have you on board. So we take off, and the first officer starts puking his guts out at the trash can. And it was
only on a check ride. Only on a check ride.
Solo from that point on, except it was worse than solo because I didn't know, if this guy was going to die or get worse. And occasionally he would reach up and change the radio frequency. Okay, he's still alive. And I was doing everything with his feet on the jump seat. Landed, and the FAA guy just got up and left. He didn't really say much of anything. You pass, I guess. We got off the airplane. I told the guys coming on, taking the airplane, whoever's on the right side, get out some alcohol wipes and clean everything. I don't know what this guy's got, but you don't want it. And we got on the phone with scheduling, and I said, this guy needs to go home. And apparently he had tried to give away the trip before we flew it. They were suspicious that he was faking. They weren't going to pull him. And I got give me the phone here. Yeah, I just spent an hour and a half with this guy puking his guts 2 feet away from me. He's not faking it. Send him home. Yeah. And it wasn't my last flight, but I assume the next day, that's the last flight I remember, because the next day I went home, and then I had the event that caused me to lose my medical. That's what I consider my final, that was my Finney flight, the 7-3. Not the best way to celebrate. 2 of
but
those
memorable
flights where you didn't know it was your last flight.
Well, I want to make sure I thank you for something very specific that you've done for me, and that's make sure that I get the details right about the novel I've written about the F-117, because I, like many people, had bought into one of the great urban legends about the F-117 crash outside Bakersfield in 1986. And that was really the first time. I was flying the A-10 at the time on my first assignment. We had heard whispers about this secret airplane, some of our friends disappearing and not hearing from them again for a while. And so we knew there was something flying. And then when this crash happened in 1986, we thought, oh, that must be it. And of course, the Air Force sealed off the site, wouldn't say what had crashed and so forth. But the rumor, the urban legend that sprang up was that the Air Force, after cleaning up the crash site, had seeded wreckage from another airplane, from an F-101 Voodoo, into the site to confuse anyone who might go out there looking for aircraft parts. And that persisted so much, that legend, that when I sat down to write the book about the F-117, which will be coming out later this year, chapter 1 ended with my character, who's a female reporter, going out and finding debris in the crash site. You set me straight and said, actually, that's not the way it happened. So I'm wondering if you would share your insights about that time with us, and also tell us why this urban legend around Ross Mulhauer's crash site outside Bakersfield has been so strong and so persistent over the years?
Sure. I feel privileged to have had a look ahead of certain looks into your first chapter and other parts of your book, and I look forward to getting a signed first edition when that comes out. My whole 3 years at Tonopah, I was either the chief of flight safety or the chief of safety. This was during that magical period when Tactical Air Command decided anybody going to be a squadron commander had to be a chief of safety first. So I had 6 bosses in the rotating door in 3 years. As a lieutenant colonel would come in, spend a couple of months being chief of safety, then go get a squadron. They were great guys, but their attention was generally elsewhere. As a captain, I got into meetings where most other captains wouldn't be in, and there was discussion. I remember specifically being in there with Mike Harris and Doug Robinson, the commander of the 4450th and the deputy commander for maintenance. And Colonel Robinson said, they specifically addressed that. We thought about taking other airplane parts out there, but we just want to hide the truth. We don't want to create a lie to the American people. And when you think about what would have happened had that happened, there'd be parts, the Aviation Week would have been all over it. We went to the crash site that's been sealed off. Here's what we found. And, they got smart people at Aviation Week. They said, this is like, there's different rumors. You said F-101, other people say F-105. People did go to the crash site and look around and see what they could see. And what they found were little shards of metal. The place had been wiped clean of anything, but there were still little pieces buried in the dirt. I'm talking like thumbnail size or the size of a quarter. And I know this because the people who did that, whether they're reporters or just general public had an interest, they were patriots enough to think maybe this is important and I should give it to the Air Force in case it matters. And it was like a sandwich bag, just a lunch bag. And there was like, in this sandwich bag, there was like this much metal in the bottom, little shards of metal the size of a nickel, a quarter, a thumbnail. And I know that because that came to me and it spent the rest of its time in my desk in my office at Tonopah Test Range. If there had been big chunks of metal, landing gear, compressor blades, turbine buckets, whatever, they wouldn't have been picking up little bitty pieces of metal and sending them back to the Air Force. They'd have pictures of themselves holding, look at this big chunk of metal I found. When you hear this story, there's never been anyone saying, I'm the guy who did that. I took the airplane parts, I spread them around there. It's always, well, I was told this, or we got a briefing that happened. Well, did you meet the guy? Did somebody say, I picked up F-105 pieces? There's plenty of crashed airplanes. I've taken a helicopter ride around the Nellis Ranges after Mike Stewart's crash, looking for flight controls that might have come off of his. And every time we see somebody, stop, wait, oh, no, that's got propellers. Stop over here. No, that's an old F-105. They're all over the place. There are plenty of them, but they didn't do it. And, it's hard to prove a negative, but people go, there would still be pieces out there now. You can look on YouTube and people walk the crash site and talk about Ross and how the crash happened, and there's nothing there. There would still be pieces there today because people get tired of picking up, chunks of metal. The market value would go down. Nobody would believe they're from a stealth fighter or anything. This started being passed around some point after the crash, and the Air Force got into the we can neither confirm nor deny thing and thought, well, this is a great cover story we hadn't really planned on, but if you're going to provide it for us, sure. It just didn't happen. They licked the hillside clean of any remnants they could find. And anything that was left is in a baggie in my old desk at Tonopah Test Range.
Well, I changed chapter 1, the ending of chapter 1 in the novel, because of what you told me. So now, when Gina Gibraltar goes out to the crash site, they find nothing, any trace, any evidence of the crash.
I think that's much more accurate.
I appreciate that. So, Rick, when you talk to young people, what advice do you give them to encourage them to learn to fly?
I'm not around a lot of young people. Mostly the interactions on the topic would be, say, if I go to an Air Force Academy reunion or something. I went there a couple times for job duty when I was in the Joint Staff. You interact with the cadets and you say, well, what do you want to do when you graduate? And I'm hoping I hear, I want to fly the F-35. And I hear things like, I was hoping to get into UAVs. It's startling. I know guys who have quit rather than take an assignment. But I try to be encouraging and say, yeah, that's a growth area. You could do great. But you don't want to fly. I think I mentioned earlier when I was at the academy, that was the thing. A very large percentage of the cadets wanted to fly, and the emphasis was on keeping your medical qualifications so you could go on to pilot training. For people who are interested in flying, I encourage them. I say it's an expensive hobby. If you want to join the military, they'll teach you for free, but you're going to owe them, and you might wind up staying for the 20 or 30 years because you love it so much.
Yeah.
One thing I tell parents, if you think your kid's interested in flying, get them a ride in a glider, because that's the purest form of flying. I think you can control it just by hearing the wind. You don't have to look at your airspeed. There's no engine to worry about quitting because you didn't have one when you took off. Generally, there's no radio chatter to be distracting. You just fly the airplane. When I was checking out the F-16 at Luke in '88, when I'd have a free afternoon, I'd go up to the glider school up by Lake Pleasant, north of Phoenix. I probably should have been studying how the radar works or whatever, but I was doing this exact same spiel, sitting with my wife in the car having lunch between a couple of glider flights. You could do this. There's no engine. There's no radio distraction. And while I'm saying this, she points out the windshield. What about that? And here comes his glider, one guy in it, and he's like 10 feet off the runway. And you could see him in there going like, what? This doesn't look right. And he flies the entire length of the runway at 10 feet AGL. And everybody at the airport is like stopped, frozen, watching this guy. And at the end of the runway, you see him do the stupidest, worst possible thing, start a turn. And he was okay. I think the glider sustained some damage, and he became persona non grata at the turf soaring school. But, it only takes one guy to poke a hole in your best argument.
So, Rick, my last question is this. How important is being a pilot to your sense of identity?
Oh, it's, I lost my medical in 2007. I mentioned that once or twice, and it was just all I had done up to that point. Flying fighters, flying airliners, flying gliders. I owned an airplane. I had a Cessna 310 that I did a lot more maintenance on than flying. That's probably the typical story of any general aviation airplane owner. But then it all just came to a stop. And, I had flown with guys, mostly at the airline, who said, boy, I sure hope this company stays in business because I don't know how to do anything else. This is the only thing I know how to do. And you kind of want to look at the guy and say, you're kind of a dope, aren't you? You really don't have any other skills or knowledge or anything. But, fortunately for them, the company stayed in business and was very successful. And I'm sure they have had rewarding careers and very fat 401ks. But mine came to a stop, and I had to reorient myself. And I'm an aeronautical engineer, a master's degree in engineering, professional engineer, and I had to just take a whole new direction and became a GS-15 on the joint staff once the disability insurance only lasts so long. And that became a very rewarding career also, being around very smart people and traveling and being involved in some of the most cutting edge projects. We did air and missile defense in my organization there. And then after about 9 years, I'd had it with the DC traffic and got a transfer out to Kirtland near Albuquerque and was a director of engineering for air delivered nuclear weapons capabilities. And that was just a great assignment too. The really smart people to be around. And one of the first questions they say, when was the last time nuclear weapons were used to protect the country? And everybody says, well, August 9th, 1945. No, they're being used right now, today. It's deterrence. If we didn't have nuclear weapons, they're being used right now as deterrence. And, it's a continuing mission, very important. So I was able to find new meaning, new motivation. But, yeah, I'd still like to go fly. There's a glider port near here. Maybe I'll go. I thought you'd have to get another medical certificate to be able to fly gliders, but it's changed to where you just say, I feel good, let's go. And that's all it takes.
Okay.
That's not a quote out of the FARs, but it's about what it boils down to. Maybe I'll return to flying here soon.
Sounds good. Well, I'll go up with you. Let's have fun.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you so much. So you've been listening to the Flyboy Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by our parent organization, the Flyboy Lab. The mission of the Flyboy Lab is to elevate awareness and appreciation of aviators, their service, sacrifices, and contributions. Hopefully, we've fulfilled that mission today. New episodes of the Flyboy Podcast drop every Thursday morning, and you can find all our previous episodes on our website, theflyboypodcast.com. Until our next sortie, push the Mach, use the vertical, and fly safe.